On the morning of August 12, 1993, David Miles and four close friends set out to spend the day diving for abalone on the northern coast of California. This was a familiar routine for the group. Every few weeks, they made this trip to these coastal waters, not only for the adventure and the companionship, but also for the chance to collect abalone, a prized shellfish species that could bring them extra money when sold at local markets. As they waded into the cool water, the sun cast a golden glow over the rugged coastline and intensified the feeling of promise that the day carried. With their dive buoy floating beside them as a safety marker, the group swam away from the shore. Laughter and conversation filled the air as they prepared for the dive. They slipped beneath the surface, and for about 30 minutes, David and his friends explored the seabed, each moving in a different direction and occasionally surfacing to breathe. The clear water revealed patches of rocky ground where they hoped to find the distinctive shells of abalone. The group moved effortlessly through the water, exploring at their own pace. While the others swam farther out, David decided to circle a large rock formation that had caught his eye. He carefully searched the cracks for abalone, but after a few minutes, he realized that there was nothing remarkable to be found there. With a calm kick of his fins, he began to rise toward the surface, ready to meet up with the others again. During the ascent, David was fascinated by the underwater landscape and distracted by the swaying kelp and the schools of fish darting between the rocks. His thoughts drifted as he took in the peaceful beauty around him, not realizing that danger was lurking nearby. Suddenly, without warning, he was struck violently from behind and ripped out of his peaceful state of mind. A massive great white shark, estimated to be between 5.5 and 6 meters long, charged at David. The shark swallowed him head first. Its jaws closed around David's head and shoulders. David could feel that his head was inside the shark's mouth, and he could even see light shimmering through the shark's teeth. The shark bit again, and now gripped him behind the shoulder blades. David remained motionless, afraid that the shark would tear him apart if he fought back. In one fortunate moment, the shark briefly opened its mouth. David seized the opportunity and pushed himself out of the shark's jaws. His adrenaline surged, and he swam frantically about 30 meters to a nearby rock formation. He threw off his weight belt so he could swim faster and desperately tried to get out of the water before the shark could attack again. Fortunately, he reached the rock formations and climbed out of the water. He screamed for help, his voice echoing across the waves. Mike Swartzel, one of David's closest friends, surfaced after his dive and was the first to hear the desperate screams. When he looked toward the rocks, he saw David in obvious distress. Without hesitation, Mike swam toward him and reached the rocks where David had managed to save himself. Within a few minutes, the entire group had gathered on the rock, fully aware of the severity of the situation. One of David's friends brought the dive buoy with him, knowing that it would be important for the return. David's injuries were serious, and there was no time to lose. The shark had bitten through his scalp and left several cuts on his head and neck, and his back was torn open with deep wounds, as if it had been cut with a filleting knife. They knew they had to get David back to shore quickly, but he was terrified of going back into the water. After 30 agonizing minutes of persuading him, the friends decided to make the dangerous return journey, even though the shark was still nearby. They jumped back into the water and used the dive buoy for support as they moved toward the shore. David, weakened by blood loss and increasingly falling into shock, clung to the buoy while Mike pulled him, always painfully aware that the shark could return at any moment. As they swam, David became more and more lethargic, and Mike feared that his friend might lose consciousness before they reached the shore. Still, they pushed forward, determined to bring David to safety. Luckily, they were not attacked again, and they finally made it back to the beach. The beach lay below a large cliff, which made access difficult. David had to be flown out from the shore by a Coast Guard helicopter and taken to Mendocino Coast Hospital in Fort Bragg. His injuries were severe, and he needed more than 100 stitches to close them, but miraculously he survived. Later, in an interview, David described his experience as winning the lottery, and I think we can all agree that this was truly a life-threatening lottery that David was incredibly lucky to win. Shirley Ann Durden was a 33-year-old housewife who lived with her husband Barry and their 4 children in the quiet town of Carcoo, Australia. Since their marriage, the couple had dreamed of leaving their simple farm life behind and living a peaceful life by the sea. When Barry finally surprised Shirley with the news that he had secured a house near the beach at Port Lincoln, she was overjoyed. Port Lincoln, located in South Australia on the Eyre Peninsula, is known as the seafood capital of the country and is a popular tourist destination celebrated for its stunning coastal beauty. For Shirley, who loved the sea, it was a dream come true. After settling into their new life, the Durdens enjoyed their days to the fullest and lived the beach lifestyle. They relaxed on the shore, sunbathed, went fishing, and went diving. Their happiness felt complete, as if nothing could ever go wrong. One day, their longtime friend Keith Coventry visited and suggested a dive to collect fresh scallops. Shirley and Barry, both adventurous and experienced divers, immediately agreed. The thrill of a new adventure and the challenge of diving, something that had connected them since the beginning of their relationship, was simply too tempting to refuse. On March 3, 1985, the trio arrived at the beach, prepared their gear, and reassured their children that they would soon be back. Eagerly, they set out and swam into the shallow waters, about 2 meters deep, to search for scallops. Unknown to them, a huge, starving, 6-meter-long great white shark was lurking in the shadows, silently watching them and waiting. As they searched the seabed, the trio quickly filled their bags with fresh scallops. Their excitement over their underwater find grew with each piece they collected. Shirley and Barry exchanged smiles through their diving masks and enjoyed the peaceful beauty of the clear water as well as the thrill of the activity. The water was calm, and they could see everything clearly. Barry and Keith felt safe. Statistically, an encounter with a shark was unlikely. Most great white sharks avoid shallow waters, and attacks on humans are rare. Even when a shark bites, it usually lets go quickly. Humans are too bony and not as tasty as their preferred prey, seals. But for a hungry predator, those statistics meant nothing. After a successful dive, Barry and Keith decided to swim back to the beach, while Shirley continued exploring the beautiful underwater world for a little longer. Eventually, she surfaced again, her bag full of scallops, and began swimming toward the beach while calling out excitedly about her catch. As Barry and Keith waved back, Barry's smile suddenly disappeared. In the distance, he saw something, a large fin moving quickly toward Shirley. His heart stopped as the enormous dorsal fin drew closer. Then, out of nowhere, the great white shark burst out of the water and snapped its massive jaws around Shirley's lower body. It lifted her out of the water and shook her around like a toy. Blood sprayed everywhere while Shirley screamed. Her screams echoed across the beach like something from a nightmare Barry could not wake up from. It was horrifying. One moment she was there, and the next, the shark had torn her apart. The attack happened so fast that Barry stood frozen, watching as the shark dragged Shirley into the depths. A few terrible seconds passed before her lifeless body floated back to the surface. Her lower half was completely gone, and blood spread across the water like a dark stain. In panic, Barry ran toward the water, desperate to reach his wife, but Keith held him back because he knew that jumping into the shark's territory would only lead to more tragedy. What happened next was unbearable. The shark returned with its mouth wide open and, with one final powerful bite, decapitated Shirley's body. Barry's screams filled the air as the shark disappeared into the murky water, leaving behind a trail of blood. The lifeless body of his wife floated only a few meters from the shore, where their children stood screaming. Despite everything they had seen, rescuers soon arrived to try to recover Shirley's remains, but the sea had other plans. Neither Shirley's body nor the shark that attacked her was ever found. Experts suspect that the shark returned to take the rest of her torso before disappearing into the deep, taking every chance of recovery with it. It was a bright, sunny day on February 4, 2023, in Perth, Australia. While many people flocked to the busy beaches, some sought out the quieter riverbanks to escape the commotion. Among them was 16-year-old Stella Barry, a lively and adventurous teenager who was always at the center of whatever was happening. Stella and her friends had decided to spend the afternoon at the Swan River, a peaceful place not far from her home in Perth, to cool off from the summer heat. Soft music played from a nearby speaker, while Stella's friends were drawn to her lively energy. She loved making every moment unforgettable, and this day was no exception, as the group enjoyed the peaceful atmosphere and carefree afternoon by the river. As the afternoon went on, the group relaxed on the riverbank, chatted, and enjoyed the warmth after having taken a few refreshing swims earlier. After a while, Stella, who had a deep love for animals and especially dolphins, spotted a group of dolphins gliding elegantly through the water, their fins cutting through the surface of the river. The rare and fascinating sight filled her with excitement, and she could not resist getting closer. With a burst of energy, Stella stood up and carefully stepped over the smooth stones leading into the water. Her friends watched her with curiosity and amusement as she made her way to the river's edge. Without hesitation, she jumped into the cool water and splashed in, determined to get closer to the dolphins. The gentle current of the river pulled her farther out, but Stella swam with enthusiasm, her eyes fixed on the playful creatures in the distance. Her friends cheered her on from the shore and laughed as she eagerly moved closer to the dolphins. Then, without warning, she felt a sharp, unbearable pain in her leg. Something had sunk its teeth into her leg. At first, Stella panicked slightly and began thrashing wildly to free herself from whatever was causing the pain. But the more she struggled, the worse it became. The creature that had grabbed her leg did not let go, and her kicking only seemed to irritate it further. At that moment, a bull shark appeared beneath her, its massive shape moving threateningly through the water. When Stella realized the danger, she screamed for help. Some of her friends instinctively moved toward the water, but stopped because they knew they could not get too close without putting themselves in danger. The shark tightened its grip and pulled her underwater for a moment before letting go. The water around her turned red as Stella's leg was torn open. She surfaced, gasping for air, and continued fighting to get back to the shore. A man who had been spending the afternoon nearby heard the commotion and quickly jumped into the water while Stella's friends stood helplessly on the bank, too afraid of the danger to approach. The man swam quickly toward her. Fortunately, the shark had already begun to retreat, giving him the chance to reach her. He managed to pull Stella to the shore, but by the time they reached the riverbank, she was already unconscious. Things did not look good for Stella, and despite the best efforts of the bystanders, the situation became more desperate with every second. Paramedics arrived quickly and tried to stop the bleeding by applying pressure to the wounds and attempting to stabilize her. Despite their best efforts, the injuries were too severe. Stella's injuries were fatal, and she died shortly after the paramedics arrived. The incident shook the local community. Bull sharks are one of the few shark species that can live in both fresh and salt water, which makes rivers such as the Swan River part of their territory. Authorities issued warnings to the public and urged swimmers to avoid the river while they searched for the shark. One day later, a 2.5-meter bull shark was caught about 1 kilometer from the attack site with the help of local fishermen. The shark was captured and relocated far away from the river. The community mourned Stella Berry, who was remembered as a kind, joyful teenager with a bright future. Our next story is even more terrifying than the previous one. But before we dive into this story, if you have enjoyed the video so far, we ask you to subscribe to our channel. It helps us a lot and supports the channel in producing more videos. Thank you. A popular adventure destination had always fascinated the young visitor. This trip was all he could think about. The highlight was supposed to be the famous Walking with Sharks experience, an underwater adventure that allowed guests to walk beneath the surface while being guided through a shark tank. His parents stayed close to him as the air helmet was placed over his head, and they watched nervously as he was led under the water. From above, the shark tank seemed calm. The water was clear and several sharks could be seen moving through the tank. At first, everything appeared controlled. The sharks seemed used to visitors and moved calmly around them. But suddenly, the situation changed. One of the sharks came too close, and panic spread across the area. The boy was bitten, and the crowd around the tank froze in horror before anyone could react. Mr. Johnson leaped into action. Without a second thought, he jumped into the tank, ignoring the danger, and helped pull the boy out. The injured boy was rushed to the nearest hospital, where doctors treated the wound and worked to stabilize him. Because of the quick rescue and medical care, he survived the attack. After the investigation into the incident, the park implemented stronger safety measures to prevent accidents like this from happening again, including stricter rules about how close sharks could get to visitors. However, the attack did not completely end people's interest in walking with sharks. It was the morning of January 5, 1992, and the air was still as Jose Lorenzo prepared for what seemed like a routine fishing trip off Punta Negra. Jose, a 38-year-old man, had spent most of his life at sea. Born and raised on the Chilean coast, the ocean had always been his second home. Fishing was not just a job for him, it was a way of life that offered both fulfillment and the opportunity to support his family. His love for the sea went hand in hand with his work as a diver, where he harvested the prized Chilean abalone, locally known as locos. These abalones are a valued delicacy along the Pacific coasts of Chile and Peru. Their tender, flavorful meat is highly sought after, not only for its taste, but also for the significant income it can bring. Fishermen like Jose can make a good living by harvesting locos, but with high rewards come high risks. Harvesting these ocean treasures requires divers to conquer the rocky coasts of the Pacific and venture into deep waters while searching submerged crevices for this elusive species. Every dive promised valuable rewards, but also the looming danger that the same waters rich with life could quickly become a deadly battlefield. That morning, Jose was accompanied by two of his diving friends as they headed out in their boat. They anchored only a few meters from shore, ready to begin their work. With his lever in his hand, Jose was ready to pry the locos from their hiding places on the rocky seabed. Without hesitation, he dove into the water and broke through the calm surface with a smooth leap. The cool embrace of the sea welcomed him as he descended, dragging his collections bag behind him, ready to be filled. For the next 30 minutes, Jose moved skillfully through the depths. He peeled locos from the rocks and even speared a few curious fish that came too close. His experience as a diver showed in every precise movement. But when he checked his harvest, it was not what he had hoped for. The bags were lighter than expected, leaving a hint of frustration in his stomach. Not being someone who gave up easily, Jose climbed back into the boat and signaled to his friends that they would move farther out to find a richer spot. The promise of a larger harvest lay just beyond the horizon, and he was determined to find it. After searching the coast, Jose and his crew found a promising new location about 18 meters from shore. The water there had a certain clarity, and the rock formations below suggested the presence of abalone. Jose had a good feeling about this spot. He turned to his friends, smiled, and spoke with a sense of optimism before diving into the water, unaware that this would become the most dangerous dive of his life. What none of them knew was that they had anchored too close to a sea lion colony, a notorious hunting ground for larger predators. As Jose descended, the ocean around him felt peaceful, almost calming. The water here was about 9 meters deep, and after only a few moments of searching, he discovered a cluster of locos clinging to the rocks. His lever was ready, and as he carefully freed the abalone from their hiding place and let them slip into his bag, the calm was suddenly shattered. From the corner of his eye, Jose noticed a flash of movement, a shadow moving faster than anything in the ocean should move. Before he could fully register what was happening, the massive form of a great white shark appeared and glided silently toward him. Panic overwhelmed his body as he instinctively raised his left arm in defense, but it was too late. The shark's enormous jaws snapped shut and seized his upper body with unimaginable force. Razor-sharp teeth tore through his wetsuit and shredded his flesh, while his left arm and shoulder were ripped apart in one violent, bloody moment. Above the surface, Jose's crew did not immediately understand the nightmare unfolding below. Only when the sea turned deep red and the huge form of a great white shark surfaced with what remained of Jose's upper body in its jaws did they realize the terrifying truth. Frozen and overwhelmed, they could only watch as the shark held their friend. His head and left arm were gone, and his body was almost unrecognizable. Nearby, other boats noticed the chaos and quickly rushed over, their crews desperate to help. The boatmen revved their engines loudly, sending powerful vibrations through the water. The noise had an effect, and the massive shark finally pulled away. Cease. Jose's crew used the brief moment and, without hesitation, recovered his remains and raced toward the shore where emergency services were waiting and ready to act. Despite their quick return, nothing more could be done. The entire coastal community was shocked by the tragedy. The attack on Jose was something none of them had ever experienced. His diving companions, shaken to the core by the horror, swore never to return to the ocean again. An autopsy later revealed the extent of his injuries. Decapitation at the 7th cervical vertebra, and his left arm and shoulder had been torn from his body. The responsible great white shark was estimated to be more than 5.8 meters long, one of the largest seen in the region in recent years. The death of Jose Lorenzo proved that the true rulers of the ocean are its predators, and no amount of money is worth risking your life. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to our channel. That would help us very much. We will see you in the next episode.